Greetings, traveler. You did not stumble here by chance. The universe rarely makes mistakes, and what you're about to witness isn't just a story. It's a soft key turning in the lock of something you felt but perhaps never named. You see, some knowledge arrives not through lessons, but through remembering. Not in thunderclaps, but in whispers. And what you're remembering was never truly forgotten. They say reality is something we walk through, a shared stage, solid and known. But what if that's a clever illusion? What if reality is more like a mirror, one that only reflects back what you're ready to perceive? For most, the world remains a flat painting. But for some, something begins to shift. Colors deepen, the air trembles. A pattern hidden behind the ordinary begins to breathe. If you've ever looked at a clock and caught 11:11 too many times to call it chance, if you've felt an eerie familiarity when meeting a stranger, or dreamed of places you've never visited but somehow know, then you've already brushed against the veil. And this veil, as delicate as mist and as ancient as starlight, is not there to block you. It's there to ask you a question. Are you ready to see? This is not the type of seeing your eyes offer. It's a seeing that comes from silence, from stillness, from the space between thoughts. Many never reach it, not because they can't, but because they won't stop long enough to hear the invitation. In the early days of my own remembering, life felt like a series of cracked reflections. Things almost made sense, but not quite. I tried to explain it with science, with logic, with data. But the deeper I looked, the more I saw that truth, real truth, is not an answer. It's a state, a resonance. One night, sitting alone in a silent room, I felt something shift. It wasn't dramatic. No light burst from the ceiling. No voice echoed in the air, but something inside me grew quiet. Not the kind of quiet that's empty, but the kind that feels full. I didn't gain a revelation that night. I lost noise. And in losing noise, I began to hear something else. It wasn't a voice. It was more like a knowing, a pull, like the universe breathing through me, like 1,000 lifetimes leaning forward, whispering now. And that's when I truly began to see that the world wasn't out there. It was inside. And every emotion I carried, every thought I fed, shaped not just how I felt, but how reality moved around me. This was not metaphor. It was mechanics, subtle, sacred, forgotten by time but never lost. A name began appearing again and again, Jacobo Grinberg, a scientist, a mystic, a man who straddled two worlds, the measurable and the mysterious. He spoke of a matrix, not the digital kind, but a living, breathing field of potentiality that listens to our frequency and molds reality in response. And when he disappeared, many thought it was a tragedy. But others knew, perhaps he hadn't vanished, perhaps he had crossed. You and I, we haven't disappeared, but we are being called. You can feel it, can't you? That tug when the world feels too small. That ache when the old explanations feel like dried skin you've outgrown. That moment when the world stops feeling random and starts feeling choreographed. This story you're reading isn't fiction, it's resonance. And the fact that it found you now, of all times, is not coincidence. The veil is thinning, not to scare, not to confuse, but to invite. So come closer, sit with the fire of your own awareness. Let this be the beginning of a remembering, not of what the world is, but of who you truly are, behind the noise, beneath the roles, within the silence. This is only the beginning. The matrix is listening. It begins slowly, this shift, so quietly in fact that most mistake it for mood, or perhaps a season of burnout. They'll say you're just tired, too sensitive, too distracted. But deep down, something more is unfolding. You notice it not in grand awakenings, but in the moments you can no longer pretend. The laugh that feels forced, the job that drains you, even if it pays well, the conversations that feel like echoes of someone you used to be. And then comes the discomfort, not the pain of injury, but the ache of truth pressing against a soul that has outgrown its skin. Your comforts become cages, your roles feel scripted. You begin to see yourself from the outside, not with judgment, but with a strange tenderness, as if your deeper self is gently tapping your shoulder and saying, "It's time." This is not the end. This is the beginning of what ancient traditions called the descent. Not a fall, but a deep dive into the root of the self. You're not climbing toward enlightenment, you're sinking into authenticity. It feels like unlearning more than learning, like peeling away masks one by one until only your essence remains. Some call this shadow work, others call it integration. Whatever the name, it's sacred. Because before you can hold light, you must know what's been hiding in your dark. And the dark isn't evil, it's ignored, abandoned. Parts of you frozen in time, waiting for you to return. Not with shame, but with love. You start to feel energy differently. Not as a concept, but as a language. The room that feels heavy after an argument. The way someone's presence either expands or constricts your breath. You realize emotions aren't random, they are messengers. And discomfort isn't the enemy, it's a doorway. I remember a moment during this descent where I felt completely undone. I was sitting in a cafe, nothing unusual happening, yet my chest was tight, my eyes suddenly heavy with tears I couldn't name. I left my coffee untouched, stepped outside, and felt the air wrap around me like a question. Who was I before all this? Before the roles, the accomplishments, the projections? The truth is, most of us wear identities like costumes. Some are inherited, others we crafted to survive, but none of them are the full story. The soul doesn't speak in resumes, it speaks in stillness. And when the noise fades, what rises isn't a brand or title, it's a frequency, yours. That day I didn't find answers, but I found a pause, and within that pause was a presence I hadn't felt in years. It didn't explain anything, but it made everything make sense. And that's the paradox of awakening. It's not always enlightening. Sometimes it's humbling, grounding, even lonely. But within that loneliness is a clarity. You begin to see which connections nourish you and which drain you. You start noticing what feels forced, and most importantly, you stop betraying yourself to belong. The masks fall, not because you rip them off, but because they no longer fit. You no longer need to be impressive. You need to be real. And in being real, you become magnetic, not in a loud way, but in a quiet pull. You start attracting moments, people, signs, not because you chase them, but because you match them. Resonance becomes your compass, and life begins to organize around your truth. And then it begins. Subtle at first, like whispers brushing against your consciousness. You start noticing the improbable, not because you're looking for signs, but because the signs begin looking for you. The clock strikes 11:11 just as you think of someone long lost. A stranger on the street hums a tune you dreamed of last night. A book falls off the shelf and opens to the exact page that echoes your current struggle. At first, you question it. Surely it's coincidence, right? Just random sparks in a chaotic world. But the feeling doesn't pass. Instead, it deepens. You realize these glitches in reality are not glitches at all. They are echoes, responses, alignments. The external world, far from being indifferent, is starting to speak in the language of your inner world. And that language is energy. You see, reality doesn't speak English. It speaks vibration, frequency, intention. You are not just a being within the world. You are a tuning fork, humming your internal state into the fabric of the matrix. And when your inner song changes, so does the rhythm of everything around you. This is the power of resonance. Not magic, but mechanics. The deeper your presence, the clearer your signal. And the clearer your signal, the more the world rearranges to reflect it. Some call it manifestation, others call it law of attraction. But those are just names for what the mystics and shamans have always known. The world is listening. Jacobo Grimberg spoke of this. He called it the formational matrix, a living field of intelligence that interacts with consciousness. He believed that reality is not fixed, but flexible, not imposed, but co-created. Every thought, every belief, every deep emotional tone becomes like a fingerprint pressed into this matrix. And the matrix, like water, responds instantly to your shape. The problem is, most of us don't realize what we're broadcasting. We ask for love, but carry wounds of rejection. We wish for abundance, but move with the energy of lack. And the matrix doesn't respond to words, it responds to essence. You can say I'm fine 1,000 times, but if your core whispers I'm lost, the field listens to the whisper. This is why alignment matters more than effort. You don't need to hustle the universe. You need to harmonize with it. And to do that, you must become honest with your frequency. Not perfect, just transparent. The truth is, we are always emitting, always communicating, even in silence, especially in silence. Synchronicities are the universe's way of saying, yes, I heard you. They are checkpoints, echoes, confirmations that your inner and outer realities are beginning to sync. And the more you pay attention to them, not obsessively, but reverently, the more fluent you become in this silent dialogue with the cosmos. I remember one moment clearly. I had just made a decision that terrified me, to leave a path I had invested years in without knowing what came next. That night, as doubt crept in, I sat by a window, lost in uncertainty. And then, a white feather drifted down outside, perfectly lit by the streetlight, hovering like a symbol. It landed softly against the glass, no wind, no birds nearby, just silence and that single sign. I didn't need explanation. I just knew. It was enough. Not because it told me what would happen, but because it reminded me that I was not walking this path alone. The matrix was aware, responding, aligning. And from that day, I began to trust synchronicity not as superstition, but as sacred choreography. I started tracking the small signs, numbers, dreams, gut feelings, and over time a pattern emerged. Not linear, but intelligent, like a woven thread only visible when you step far enough back to see the whole tapestry. You realize then that synchronicities are not rare. They are constant, but they require presence. When your mind is scattered, the pattern disappears. When your mind is still, the design unfolds. And as your inner world aligns, your outer world reflects that alignment with exquisite precision. The conversation with reality becomes continuous, poetic. You stop needing signs, you become one. The deeper you walk this path, the more you realize reality doesn't ask for your obedience, it asks for your coherence. It doesn't reward effort, it responds to frequency. And so, you begin the slow, honest work of refinement, not of your outer world, but of your inner resonance. This is not easy. It requires you to look at what you've long avoided, the silent beliefs that shape your choices, the fears inherited from voices no longer present, the rules you absorbed without consent, the parts of you that flinch in the dark, even when the threat is long gone. These aren't just memories. They are architects of your reality. You begin to see that much of your suffering wasn't caused by events themselves, but by the meanings you attached to them. That heartbreak wasn't just the loss of a person, it was the echo of feeling unworthy. That rejection wasn't about them, it was your old wound reawakened. Your present is often haunted not by ghosts, but by echoes, and echoes fade when faced with presence. So you turn inward, not to escape the world, but to rewire your relationship with it. You sit with discomfort, not to conquer it, but to listen to it. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And instead ask, what is this showing me about me? This question doesn't bring blame, it brings power. Because once you see that your thoughts and feelings shape the lens through which you perceive everything, you reclaim your authorship. No longer just a character in the script, now a co-writer. This shift is not glamorous, it's gritty. Some days feel hollow, others feel like breakthroughs. There are no medals, no applause, only small, silent victories, a boundary upheld, a truth spoken, a trigger faced without collapse. These are the bricks of a new reality, one built not from control, but from clarity. You realize healing is not becoming someone new. It's remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget. It's not about adding more, it's about shedding. And what you shed in time becomes sacred compost for your evolution. You begin to reframe your beliefs. Instead of saying, I always attract chaos, you ask, what part of me feels safest in chaos? Instead of saying, no one sees my value, you whisper, where did I first learn to hide my light? These aren't affirmations, they're invitations. Not to force change, but to meet yourself with curiosity instead of judgment. And slowly, the mirror changes. Not because the reflection lied before, but because you finally looked beyond the distortion. The world, once blurry and overwhelming, starts to soften. You see patterns where there was once noise, meaning where there was once confusion, beauty where there was once indifference. Not because the world became better, but because you did. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when something irreversible happens. You stop asking the world to give you proof, and instead, you become the proof. This is the threshold where understanding becomes embodiment, where wisdom is no longer something you seek, but something you radiate. You realize that alignment isn't about perfection, it's about coherence, about becoming so deeply rooted in your truth that even in chaos, you remain clear. Even when others don't understand you, you remain kind. Even when fear whispers, you remain steady. This doesn't mean you don't feel the waves. It means you've remembered that you are not the wave, you are the ocean. Reality, once a rigid backdrop, now begins to move with you, like breath in the lungs of something cosmic. You start living not from reaction, but from creation. You wake each day not wondering what will happen, but offering a signal into the matrix. This is who I am today. This is the vibration I choose. Let life rise to meet me. And life does. Not always in the way you expect, but always in the way you need. Synchronicities become seamless. People appear at the right time. Paths unfold without being chased. And yet, you no longer obsess over outcomes. You trust the rhythm. You trust yourself. Because at this point, you are no longer looking for signs. You are moving as one. The difference is subtle but powerful. You stop chasing and you start emanating. You stop controlling and you begin allowing. The world shifts not because you forced it, but because you invited it differently. Intuition becomes your compass, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that hums softly, guiding you through felt sense rather than logic. A pull toward a street you've never walked. A hesitation that saves you from unseen harm. A sudden yes that rearranges your entire timeline. You begin to notice that your gut speaks a language more ancient than words, one that animals have never forgotten, one that children still trust. To hear this voice clearly, you don't need to analyze, you need to anchor. Anchor into stillness, into breath, into presence. For it is here in this sacred quiet that the signal becomes loud. This is the art of conscious creation. Not wishful thinking, not toxic positivity, but true vibrational authorship. You begin each day not hoping to find peace, but becoming the space where peace happens. You no longer affirm worthiness, you live as one who remembers they are worthy. And in that embodiment, reality bends, not as a reward but as a reflection. This is not the end of the path. It is the dissolving of the illusion that there was ever a path at all. You're not going anywhere. You're arriving to yourself over and over, deeper each time. And in that arrival, the world begins to reflect back not your fears, not your conditioning, but your essence. And so here you are, still you, but softer. Still human, but luminous. Still learning, but also guiding. You've become a lighthouse, not for everyone, but for those tuned to your frequency. You don't need to preach. Your being is your message. You didn't just read this story. You called it forth. Not because you were lost, but because a deeper part of you knew it was time to remember. And in remembering, you begin again, not as a seeker, but as a co-creator of the sacred. What you've just read isn't only a story, it's a map. A layered one, invisible to the eye but felt by the soul. And like any true map, it's filled with symbols that require a deeper kind of reading. Let's slow down and revisit some of the most important terms, not as abstract ideas, but as tools for real transformation. 1. The matrix, formational matrix. This isn't the one from the movie. In Grinberg's language, the matrix is the underlying energetic field from which all experiences emerge. Think of it like a canvas of potential, constantly responding to the brushstrokes of your consciousness. Every belief, emotion, and intention you carry becomes a pattern that reshapes the world around you. The matrix doesn't judge, it mirrors. 2. Frequency and vibration. Your body has a pulse, your thoughts do too. Emotions vibrate, joy is light, fear is dense. Everything about you emits a frequency. This frequency acts like a signal, and life listens. When you align your inner world with peace, you draw peaceful moments. When you radiate chaos, you often attract confusion. The more conscious you become of what you're broadcasting, the more you shift your experience without needing to change the outside world. 3. Resonance. Resonance is what happens when the outside matches the inside. You meet someone and instantly feel safe. That's resonance. You hear a message and it feels written for you. That's resonance. It's not random, it's recognition. The world is showing you where your energy already lives. 4. Shadow work. Not about darkness in a scary way. The shadow is anything you've pushed away inside yourself. Fear, shame, anger, vulnerability. Shadow work is the practice of gently meeting these parts with compassion, so they stop silently running your life. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about reclaiming your wholeness. Or 5. Conscious creation. This is not think happy thoughts and your life will be perfect. This is about becoming so grounded in your truth that your very presence shifts the environment. You don't manipulate reality. You harmonize with it. Creation begins from vibration, not force. 6. Synchronicity. These are meaningful coincidences that act like cosmic breadcrumbs, numbers repeating, a stranger speaking your deepest thought, a closed door that becomes a divine detour. When you notice them, it means your soul and the world are moving in rhythm. It's not superstition, it's alignment. 7. Intuition. This is your internal compass, older than logic, quieter than thought. It speaks through sensation, knowing, and deep inner pulls. You don't sharpen intuition by overthinking. You sharpen it by slowing down, being present, and listening. These 7 keys form the architecture of everything we've explored. When understood not just with the mind but with the body and spirit, they become the bridge between who you were told to be and who you truly are. You were never lost. You were only layered. And now perhaps you've begun to peel back what isn't yours, so that what always was can finally be remembered.